شهد الله أنه لا إله إلا هو والملائكة وأولو العلم قائما بالقسط لا إله إلا هو العزيز الحكيم.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهديه الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد. So today we're going to start from the 10th معقد بإذن الله تعالى, and the book we're studying is Tadheem Al Ilm, which is a book that talks about the etiquettes of the student of knowledge. So there's about 10 or 11 to go. Inshallah, we'll try and finish in about 5 today, and then next week we'll finish off the kitab, or finish off the book, and complete the remaining 5. طيب تفضل.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه والتابعين لهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. ما بعد. اللهم احفظ شيخنا واغفر له ولوالديه ولمشايخه والمسلمين أجمعين. قال المصنف حفظه الله: المعقد العاشر: ملازمة آداب العلم. قال ابن القيم رحمه الله في كتابه مدارج السالكين: أدب المرء عنوان سعادته وفلاحه، وقلة أدبه عنوان شقاوته وبوارحه، فما استجلب خير الدنيا والآخرة بمثل الأدب، ولا استجلب حرمانهما بمثل قلة الأدب. والمرء لا يسمو بغير الأدب، وإن يكن ذا حسب ونسب، وإنما يصلح للعلم من تأدب بآدابه في نفسه ودرسه ومع شيخه وقرينه. قال يوسف بن الحسين: بالأدب تفهم العلم، لأن المتأدب يرى أهلا للعلم فيبذل له، وقليل الأدب يعز العلم أن يضيع عنده.
طيب. The Shaykh Hafidhahullah, for the 10th ma'qad, he talks about mulazamatu al-adab, where the student of knowledge has to maintain certain etiquettes and certain adab. If these adab are met, then the student will be beautified with the adornment of knowledge. So it's like a hilya for him. These etiquettes are like an adornment. That's why Shaykh Bakr Abu Zayd, he authored a book on this topic, and he's named it Hilyatu Talib al-Ilm, the adornment of the student of knowledge. So etiquettes, they beautify the student of knowledge. They give him, or they teach him how to act. They teach him how to act around himself, how to act with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They're establishing the connection with him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the connection that he has with himself, with his family, the connection that he has with his peers, the connection that he has with his shaykh, the connection that he has with his book, all with his books, and the connection that he has with lessons. All of these are talked about when talking about the etiquettes of a student of knowledge. And these etiquettes, you can tell the student, or you can tell the difference between a student who has etiquettes, who has learned and benefited from these books, and a student who hasn't. He says, rahimahullah, Ibn Qayyim rahmatullah alayhi mentions, Adabul mar'i unwanu sa'adatihi wa falahi, wa qillatu adabihi unwanu shaqawatihi wa bawarihi. طيب. So when a person has etiquettes and he's well mannered, then that is a sign of his happiness, and that is a sign that Allah Jalla wa Ala wants goodness for him. Now these sorts of adab that we're talking about, they're general to the Muslim and more specific to the student of knowledge, because the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when Allah Jalla wa Ala talked about him, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَإِنَّكَ لَعَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ, verily you are upon great character. And when Aisha radiallahu anha was asked about the character of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she said, كَانَ خُلُقُهُ الْقُرْآنِ, his khuluq was the Quran. So every single Muslim should copy the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Like the Messenger also sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, وَخَالِقِ النَّاسَ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ. And the student of knowledge even more so. That's why people, when a alim falls into a mistake or a student of knowledge falls into a mistake, they treat it different to when a ammi or a person who isn't a student of knowledge falls into a mistake. That's why a person has to be extremely careful. Then the Shaykh says, وَإِنَّمَا يَصْلُحُ لِلْعِلْمِ مَنْ تَأَدَّبَ بِآدَابِهِ. So whoever has etiquettes in what we're about to mention, then he's the one who has been granted knowledge, or he's the one that shall be granted knowledge. بِآدَابِهِ فِي نَفْسِهِ وَدَرْسِهِ وَمَعَ شَيْخِهِ وَقَرِينِهِ. So the Shaykh mentions 4 things. مَعَ نَفْسِهِ. A person, when it comes to the etiquettes, he has to fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has to establish a connection between him and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has to have sincerity and ikhlas for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When he's learning for the sake of Allah Jalla wa ala. When he's teaching for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he makes dua to Allah Jalla wa ala that Allah makes him sincere. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes him sincere. Because whatever a person learns is either a hujjah for or against. As the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, وَالْقُرْآنُ حُجَّةٌ لَكَ وَعَلَيْكَ. The Quran is a proof for you or against you. How is it a proof for you? If you acted upon it and if you implemented the commandments of Allah Jalla wa ala. And how is it against you? If you learnt for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if you did not act upon it, then it will be a hujjah. And don't forget the hadith where the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned that the first 3 people that will be punished Yawm al-Qiyamah are 3 types of individuals who, when you look at the apparent actions that they were doing from the outside, they were doing actions that were azim. Al-jihad fi sabilillah, as-sadaqah, was-zakah, and seeking knowledge and teaching knowledge, and the kitab, seeking or teaching the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it will be said to them, what have you done with what was given to you, the knowledge that was given to you, the wealth that was given to you, and the strength and the ability and the bravery that you were given by Allah Jalla wa ala? And they will say, I learnt it for your sake and I taught it for your sake. And it will say, كذبت ولكن قلت ولكنك فعلت ليقال عالم. Lakin you said, it will be said to him, verily you have lied, you only learnt and taught so that it could be said that you're a alim. Also a person has to, مثلا, have ijtihad. He has to dedicate and be a diligent student when it comes to learning. So not only just coming for the lesson, like in reviewing the class before and reviewing the class after. وَدَرْسِهِ. And a student has to look after the etiquettes of the lesson. And we shall see the etiquettes of the Majalis al-Ilm in the next lesson, inshallah. Lakin, مثلا, with regards to the etiquettes of a student of knowledge when it comes to the book that they're studying, like for example, this book that we're studying now. Today, or last week, you all know we stopped at what number? What foundation? Number 9. And we're going to start off with number 10. So we're probably going to study 10, 11, 12, 13 and 14. So you should have already revised that. Not revised that, you should have already had a quick glance at that. You should have already read and looked into what the teacher was gonna or will be teaching during that lesson, so that you're not confused, so that you know what the teacher is going to be teaching, or you have an overview of what it is that will be taught. Then once you're in the class, you make sure you pay attention to the book. You make sure you pay attention to the book and the explanation of the teacher. So مثلا, if we're studying usul al-thalatha, bring the matan with you. Make sure you have the book with you. Don't come to class without the book. Just like if you're going to jihad, you wouldn't go without any weapons. Lakin when you're coming to class, you need to bring your book with you, just the matan, not an explanation. Then during the class, you make sure you listen attentively to the explanation that is being taught, the explanation that is being given on the book. And anything that you don't understand, you highlight it. And then if you have a question, you write the question on the side of your book or on a note, and you pass it over at the end of the class. You don't disturb during the class. During the class, don't bring an explanation to the book of the book. مثلا, if we're studying usul al-thalatha, don't bring an explanation, and while the teacher is talking, don't go through the explanation and read it like that. Shaykh Saleh Al Usaymi, hafidhahullah, who's the author of this book, he used to prevent students from bringing the explanations of the books that he's teaching. So the Shaykh, hafidhahullah, has lessons in Riyadh and in Medina. So in Medina he has Muhimmat Al-Ilm, where he teaches about 13 or 14 different mutun, 12 roughly different mutun books during a period of about 2 weeks. During the classes, the Shaykh doesn't allow anyone to bring an explanation of any of the books that he is teaching, unless it's one that the student obviously took notes from last year, and his own copy from last year that has an explanation on it already. Then when you go home, you make sure that you review what it is that you've studied. Because if you don't revise knowledge, then it is no point studying new knowledge. It is no point studying new knowledge. And how does it happen? You go home and just look over the points that we've been taught. Try and understand the matan that you're studying. At any given time, any given lesson, concentrate on the matan, the book that you are studying. Don't look at any other book. Don't look at any other explanation. And also the lesson that you're at, don't listen to more than one explanation at any one time. So if you're studying Usul al-Thalatha mathalan, don't look at the explanation. And then don't listen to any other explanations unless you finish the first explanation. Because the explanation or the sharh is only dissecting the actual matan. So once you study it once, later on in the future, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, you can study it again, or when you're going to study it again, you can look at other shuruh, other explanations. Like at the beginning, make sure you take baby steps and you look at one explanation. وَمَعَ شَيْخِهِ, and also with his shaykh. So mathalan, with the ustad or whoever's teaching the class, there are etiquettes that a person has to maintain. And in general, not only in class, like in outside of class. For example, calling the teacher by his name. Calling the teacher by his name. So mathalan, or even mathalan, if you're talking about a shaykh, you can't say, Salih said. Who's Salih? I mean Saleh Al Fawzan. Who's Saleh Al Fawzan? He's not one of the shabab, is he? Say, Shaykh Saleh Al Fawzan, hafidhahullah. Ustad Fulan. That's understandable. Like to say Fulan said. Who's Fulan? Oh, I mean Ustad Fulan. So maintaining etiquettes with na'am. And also obviously having respect for the teacher or respect for the shaykh that is teaching you, whether it's Quran, whether it's Aqidah, whether it's fiqh and so on. Also, we already studied, or last week or 2 weeks ago, there was the question on the methodology of the teacher. Tab'an, the teacher has to be someone who you are confident is upon the methodology of Ahlul Sunnah. If the person is not upon the methodology of Ahlul Sunnah, then it will be problemsome because their methodology is going to rub off on you. طيب. وَمَعَ قَرِينِهِ, also his peers, his zumala, the people that he is studying the book with. And we shall see in one of the next 13th or 14th that it's extremely important to have a friend or friends when seeking knowledge. And these friends will encourage you to seek knowledge. They should be people that are encouraging you to seek knowledge. So you have revision gatherings. So whenever you study a book or after every lesson, it's good to review the class and revise the class with your friends. If you do, that portion that you've revised with them, that will stick on you better and you remember that better and understand it better than that which you do not revise and that which you do not review. Because you may understand something that your friend hasn't understood. So you explain it to him and vice versa. He may understand something that you may have not understood or may have misunderstood. So it's like a clarification. And any issues that you have, then you can write a question down, and then next week in the next class, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, you can ask. The Shaykh says, rahimahullah, عن يوسف بن الحسين بالأدب تفهم العلم. بالأدب, when a person has etiquettes and adab, they will have and they will be able to understand. And then the Shaykh says, why is that? Because if a person has adab, يُرَى أَهْلًا لِلْعِلْمِ فَيُبْذَلُ لَهُ. If a person has etiquettes and a person adorns himself with the etiquettes of a student of knowledge, then the teacher himself will be more inclined to give him more and more and more. And there was a tabi' by the name of Abu Salama, and he used to argue with Abdullah ibn Abbas all the time. So he was prevented from attaining a lot of knowledge because he would always argue with Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. he would always argue with Abdullah ibn Abbas. Now Abdullah ibn Abbas Turjuman al-Quran, is a alim from the scholars of the companions of Ridwanullah ta'ala alayhim. So what that student or that individual should have done is take the knowledge from Abdullah ibn Abbas rather than argue with him. Arguing with him. Because if a person does argue with the student, with the shaykh, then the shaykh will get fed up of it. Sometimes you see a student asking the shaykh a question, and then the shaykh answers it, and then the student starts to have a munaqasha, a debate with him. But if you're going to have a debate with him, why ask me in the first place? So sometimes you find back and forth between a shaykh and a student, and the student keeps asking him questions. And it's not normal questions, it's questions as if he's challenging the shaykh and he's saying, what about this and what about that and what about that? So what you should do is make your question clear from the get-go. Once your question is clear, then you move on. طيب. And then he says, تفضل ومن هنا.
قال المصنف حفظه الله: ومن هنا كان السلف رحمه الله يعتنون بتعلم الأدب كما يعتنون بتعلم العلم.
طيب, the Shaykh says rahimahullah that the Salaf Ridwanullah ta'ala alayhim, and he will mention a few examples, they used to give great concern to learning adab and the etiquettes of a student of knowledge and the etiquettes of the one who wants to learn, just like they would give attention to actually seeking knowledge. So they go hand in hand. Seeking knowledge and learning the adab. تفضل.
قال المصنف حفظه الله.
So now he's going to mention a few examples.
قال ابن سيرين رحمه الله: كانوا يتعلمون الهدي كما يتعلمون العلم، بل إن طائفة منهم يقدمون تعلمه على تعلم العلم. قال مالك بن أنس رحمه الله لفتى من قريش: يا ابن أخي تعلم الأدب قبل أن تتعلم العلم. وكانوا يظهرون حاجتهم إليه. قال مخلد ابن الحسين لابن المبارك يوما: نحن إلى كثير من الأدب أحوج منا إلى كثير من العلم. وكانوا يوصون به ويرشدون إليه. قال مالك رحمه الله: كانت أمي تعممني وتقول لي: اذهب إلى ربيعة، تعني ابن أبي عبد الرحمن فقيه أهل المدينة في زمنه، فتعلم من أدبه قبل علمه. وإنما حرم كثير من طلبة العصر العلم بتضييع الأدب. أشرف الليث بن سعد على أصحاب الحديث، فرأى منهم شيئا كأنه كرهه، فقال: ما هذا؟ أنتم إلى يسير من الأدب أحوج منكم إلى كثير من العلم. فماذا يقول الليث لو رأى حالا كثير من الطلاب العلم في هذا العصر؟
طيب. So the Shaykh says from the first author or the narration he mentions عن ابن سيرين محمد بن سيرين رحمه الله: كانوا يتعلمون الهدي كما يتعلمون العلم. الهدي يعني الأداب. The Salaf, they used to learn the etiquettes of a student of knowledge just like they used to learn knowledge. So just like they used to give importance to what knowledge they're seeking, they're learning, they would do the same when it came to learning and learning the etiquettes of a student of knowledge. That's why in the gatherings of Imam Mohammed rahmatullahi alayhi rahmatan wasi'a, it is said that around 5,000 used to attend. And only 500 would be serious students of knowledge who are memorizing, who are writing down the Hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The rest would only be amazed and look at Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala and learn from his etiquettes and his adab. And when we say adab, or when the scholars say adab, it's not just the adab of how the person is or the knowledge that he's giving, like in the adab in terms of how the shaykh is sitting, in terms of how the shaykh is answering the questions, in terms of how the shaykh is mathalan combining between different evidences, how the shaykh is answering the question, and so on. All of these come under the etiquettes of a student of knowledge. That's why you can clearly tell the difference between those who actually benefited from studying with the scholars and those who did not benefit from studying with the scholars. So there's certain adab and etiquettes that you will see common amongst those who benefited from scholars. Even in their personal conduct, even in the way they teach, even in how they teach and so on, and how they deal with people. You can tell that this student has benefited from the scholars that they have sat with and so on. And then there are those who are pretenders, who haven't really sat with the scholars. And if they did, it's only one or two or few gatherings. And it was only for the sake of them saying, or that so that it could be said that this person sat with the scholars. Like in reality, their etiquettes are in one valley and the etiquettes of the ulama are in another. طيب. نعم. So Malik ibn Anas rahimahullah, he said to one of the students, تعلم يعني learn الأدب قبل أن تتعلم العلم. Learn the etiquettes and the manners before learning al-ilm itself. Learn etiquettes and adab before learning al-ilm itself. So the book that we're studying is Khulasat Tadheem Al Ilm. Inshallah, all of the other books we study, we're always going to need this book with us. We're always going to need to refer back to this book. Why? Because as soon as a student of knowledge says, I want to be a student of knowledge and I'm learning, he needs to take these adab with him. Just like when a person, mathalan, from the conditions of salah is what? Wudu, sah? Tahara is from the conditions of salah. طيب. Can you make wudu, be on tahara, start your salah and lose your wudu, break your wudu? لا, لماذا? It is a condition and you need it with you throughout the whole salah. That's the same for the adab and the etiquettes. You need it through your journey in seeking knowledge, right from the beginning to the end. That's why when a person beautifies himself with the adab of al-ilm, there's tranquility in them. There's peace in them. When they are dealing with people, they deal with people in a humble way. Like for those who don't have etiquettes, you find that they are haughty, they have kibr. And kibr is obviously something which harms the student of knowledge himself. And a person can never be a student of knowledge and have kibr. And that's not only in how they're teaching, well, they don't really teach, lakin even in the way they would answer questions, even in the way that they would refute people, there's kibr in it. That shows if a person has kibr, then he is doing the opposite to what he was commanded with. Allah, the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man tawada'a lillah," whoever has humbleness and who's humble as himself for the sake of Allah Jalla wa Ala, rafa'ahu Allah. Allah Jalla wa Ala will elevate him. Like you find that those that don't have etiquettes, they do the opposite. They use whatever knowledge that they have, if they have knowledge, to use it as a ladder to get above the people and to show that they're superior to everyone else. When in reality, when a person learns, he needs to know that he's less than everyone else. He's beneath everyone else. طيب. نعم. So the last author is Ashraf ibn Layth rahimahullah ta'ala, or Ashraf al-Layth, نعم, Layth ibn Sa'd rahimahullah ta'ala. He came across a group of Ashab Al-Hadeeth, people that were studying the Hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. فَرَأَى مِنْهُمْ شَيْءٍ كَأَنَّهُ كَرِهَ. So he saw them doing something that wasn't good. And then he says, مَا هَذَا? He said to them, أَنْتُمْ إِلَى يَسِيرٍ مِنَ الْأَدَبِ. You require, or you need etiquettes, you need adab, small amount of adab. أَحْوَجُ مِنْكُمْ إِلَى كَثِيرٍ مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. يعني you are more in need of learning and having etiquettes than you are in need of knowledge. And then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah ta'ala, what would Layth say? And the Shaykh Usaymi hafidhahullah, Shaykh Saleh Al Usaymi is saying, what would Layth say, rahimahullah, if he saw the hal of kathir min tullab al-ilm fi hadha al-asr? If he saw how, or if he would see how the students of knowledge are in this asr. And you can see it, even mathalan amongst, or if you look into social media, you get people that attribute themselves to knowledge, lakin they're far from knowledge. They attribute themselves to Qala Allah wa Qala Rasul, and they want to pick up books and so on. Lakin in their adab, it's almost a mockery, and you almost laugh at them. And they are many, where they would open up YouTube accounts or have Twitter accounts and so on, and they would claim to be refuting the batil. They're not known for anything else. They're not known for anything else except for claiming to refute batil. And then they would draw pictures of people and so on, and they would get silly images from Google Images and so on, and then mock people. What da'wah is that? What adab is that? Even if you want to refute someone, you don't put their pictures up, and you don't put pictures of boots, and you don't get pictures of tongues next to them and so on. That defeats the whole purpose of what you're doing, which is you're refuting the batil. You can't refute batil with batil. طيب.
قال المصنف حفظه الله: المعقد 11: صيانة العلم عما يشين مما يخالف المروءة ويخرمها. من لم يصن العلم لم يصنه العلم. قاله الشافعي رحمه الله: ومن أخل بالمروءة بالوقوع فيما يشين فقد استخف بالعلم، فلم يعظم هو وقع في البطالة، فتفضي به الحال إلى زوال اسم العلم عنه. قال وهب بن منبه: لا يكون البطال من الحكماء. لا يكون البطال من الحكماء، وجماع المروءة كما قاله ابن تيمية الجد في المحرر، وتبعه حفيده في بعض فتاويه: استعمال ما يجمله ويزينه، وتجنب ما يدنسه ويشينه. قيل لأبي محمد سفيان بن عيينة: قد استنبطت من القرآن كل شيء، فأين المروءة فيه؟ فقال في قوله تعالى: خذ العفو وأمر بالعرف وأعرض عن الجاهلين. فقيه المروءة وحسن الأدب ومكارم الأخلاق. ومن ألزم أدب النفس للطالب تحليه بالمروءة وما يحمل عليها، وتنكبه خوارمها التي تخل بها، كحلق لحيته أو كثرة الالتفات في الطريق، أو مد الرجلين في مجمع الناس من غير حاجة ولا ضرورة داعية، أو صحبة الأراذل والفساق والمجان والبطالين، أو مصارعة الأحداث والصغار.
طيب, the Shaykh says, Hafidahullah, the 11th point, guarding knowledge and distancing oneself from everything that can disgrace or tarnish a person's honor. So, al-muru'ah is, as the Shaykh will mention, the Shaykh will mention the ta'rif of al-muru'ah. Lakin, in summary, this ma'qid talks about things that a student of knowledge should stay away from. When an alim or a student of knowledge is known for knowledge, there are certain things that they should avoid. Not only the muharramat, like even the things that are mubah. So a student of knowledge, in his dress code, how he's dressing, how they're shaving their hair, how they're walking, they should use the etiquettes mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah. مثلا وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا. The ibad of Allah Jalla wa Ala are those that walk on the earth in a humble and befitting way. Therefore, they shouldn't move from side to side, and they shouldn't act like those people who are known for the etiquettes of the non-Muslims. Likewise, in the person's dress sense, the dress code that a person, especially more so the student of knowledge, should abide by. Not dressing like how the kuffar dress. Not dressing like how the people that are known for not constantly chasing fashion and trying to wear exactly what the non-Muslims or those people that have been afflicted with copying and imitating the non-Muslims, what they wear. As the Shaykh will mention, keeping your beard, not shaving your beard. The garment, making sure that it is above your ankle. It is above your ankle, because anything below that is haram. So making sure that a student of knowledge looks like a student of knowledge. And the only way that a person can do that is if they look into the guidance of the ulama and read their biographies. That's why the Salaf said, تَشَبَّهُ إِن لَمْ تَكُونُوا مِثْلَهُمْ إِنَّ التَّشَبُّهَ بِالْكِرَامِ فَلَاحٌ. تَشَبَّهُ إِن لَمْ تَكُونُوا مِثْلَهُم. Even if you're not like them, even if you're not imams and you're not knowledgeable at that particular moment, then تَشَبَّهُ, then copy them. So a student of knowledge should be distinguished in their behavior, in their character, in their dress code. They should be distinguished from others. طيب. So مثلا, the person shouldn't constantly be busying himself with food and what restaurants to go to. Sometimes you find people talking about restaurants all the time and what restaurant they're going to eat, what the restaurant they're going to eat at, my favorite this, my favorite that. What's your favorite food? These are things that the student of knowledge should not busy himself with. You eat because you need to eat. They're going to say, this is my favorite food and I like this and I go here or we go here and making appointments and so on. No, it's not something that is befitting. Then the Shaykh gives a definition. He says Ibn Taymiyyah al-Jadd. Ibn Taymiyyah al-Jadd. Why does he say Ibn Taymiyyah al-Jadd? Ibn Taymiyyah, the grandfather. Naam. He says Ibn Taymiyyah al-Jadd. So, مثلا, if I said to you, Ibn Taymiyyah said, who would automatically come to mind? Shaykh al-Islam, sah? Although Shaykh al-Islam is not his name, like he's known to be Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah ta'ala, Ahmad bin Halim rahimahullah ta'ala, the Imam that authored Al-Wasitiyya and so on, the great Imam, Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah. He says al-Jadd fil Muharrar, his father, his grandfather was an Imam. He's an Imam in the Hanbali madhab. He's got a book called Muharrar. And he's got other books. So when he says Ibn Taymiyyah now, he's referring to the Jadd, the grandfather. Lakin Ibn Taymiyyah's father was also an Imam. But lakin many people do not know that Ibn Taymiyyah's father was also an alim, because his father was Majd Ibn Taymiyyah and his son was Ahmad bin Halim, Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah. So he was between two mountains. His father was an alim. He was an alim himself, lakin his father was more famous or more knowledgeable, and his son became more knowledgeable than him. Naam. So he says, the Imam says, Ibn Taymiyyah's grandfather, when talking about muru'ah and the etiquettes, he says, استعمال ما يجمله ويزينه وتجنب ما يدنسه ويشينه. Conducting himself and beautifying himself and adorning himself with that which will beautify him, meaning having good character, having good akhlaq, and to also stay away from that which spoils and tarnishes one's reputation. That is muru'ah. That is muru'ah. And that changes from time to time. مثلا, during the time of Imam Ahmed and the Salaf, anyone who didn't pray Salatul Witr, their witness wouldn't be taken, their testimony wouldn't be taken, because they were known as a person who is almost close to being a fasiq, who's a disobedient person. Like, can you say that for today? No. Sometimes in the past, a person walking around without a hat would be considered someone who is not a trustworthy person, and their testimony wouldn't be taken. Like, can that be said for today? La. So the muru'ah, it kind of changes, and you will see that in the books of Hadith, inshallah, Mustalah Al-Hadeeth. طيب. Next one.
قال المصنف حفظه الله: المعقد الثاني عشر انتخاب الصحبة الصالحة له. اتخاذ الزميل ضرورة لازمة في نفوس الخلق، فيحتاج طالب العلم إلى معاشرة غيره من الطلاب لتعينه هذه المعاشرة على تحصيل العلم والاجتهاد في طلبه. والزمالة في العلم إن سلمت من الغوائل نافعة في الوصول إلى المقصود، ولا يحسن بقاصد العلا إلا انتخاب صحبة الصالحة تعينه، فإن للخليل في خليله أثره. روى أبو داود والترمذي عن أبي هريرة رضي الله عنه أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: الرجل على دين خليله، فلينظر أحدكم من يخالل. قال الراغب الأصفهاني رحمه الله: ليس إعداء الجليس لجليسه بمقاله وفعاله فقط، بل بالنظر إليه، وإنما يختار للصحبة من يعاشر للفضيلة لا للمنفعة ولا للذة، فإن عقد المعاشرة يبرم على هذه مطالب الثلاثة: الفضيلة والمنفعة واللذة.
طيب. The Shaykh says rahimahullah wa hafidhahu, for the 12th one, he mentions choosing or having friendship when seeking knowledge, choosing suitable friends when seeking knowledge. When a person is seeking, firstly, in general, people are in need of friends. Everyone needs friends. That's why they say al-insanu madiniyun bi-tab'an. A person cannot live alone. No human being can live alone. That's why everyone needs friends. And if a person doesn't have friends, they will be lonely. So this is a given fact. Lakin, when a person wants to seek knowledge, they need to have friends that have the same aim as them, that have the same objective as them, that want to seek knowledge, that want to learn, that want to memorize the book of Allah Jalla wa Ala, that want to memorize the books of Ahl Al-Ilm, that want to study Qala Allah wa Qala Rasul. So if a person has this, then these friends will encourage you. Sometimes you will encourage them and sometimes they will encourage you. Whereas if a person wants to seek knowledge on their own, yes, they may give it all they've got, lacking. There will be times when they're a bit lazy. And that's when you need a friend to tell you, let's go to the class today. Sometimes you're going to be tired and you're not going to have time. You're going to be a bit lazy. You say, I'm going to listen online. Your friend will call you and say, let's go to the class. And if you look at the siyag or the biographies of many of the scholars, many of them had friends, close friends who were as knowledgeable as them, close friends who they sought knowledge with. And from the most famous ones are Abu Zur'at al-Razi and Abu Hatim al-Razi, the two Imams who have Aqidah called Aqidah al-Raziyayn. They would seek knowledge together. They would review knowledge together. They would revise together. They would listen to one another when mathalan the other one would be reading the mutun and so on. And trust me, those ahadith that you learn with a friend, that you read to your friend and he reads to you or she reads to you and you read to her, these ahadith, you'll be more grounded in these ahadith and you won't forget these ahadith. Like if you memorize it on your own and you read it to a shaykh, after a period of time you will forget. So mathalan, if you're on your way to the class and you've memorized the 40 Nawawiyya, the 40 hadith of Imam Nawawi, on your way to the class with your friend, review it. You read the hadith and he reads the hadith. So you're reviewing, you're revising the knowledge. And the same goes for the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, he mentions the hadith of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, الرجل على دين خليله فلينظر أحدكم من يخالل. A person is always going to be upon the religion of his friends. The Arabs, they say, as-sahib sahib. As-sahib, the friend, sahib, he's one that pulls. He's either pulling you to good or he's pulling you to evil, or he's pulling you to things that are not beneficial, or he could be pulling you to things that are beneficial, that are going to benefit you in the dunya and in the hereafter. That's why some of the Salaf used to say, عن المرء لا تسأل وأبصر قرينه إن المقارن بالقرين يقتدي. إن المقارن, verily, don't ask about a person, like ask about his qareen, ask about his friends, ask about who he befriends and who he hangs around with. For verily you can tell a person by the people that he hangs around with. So if a person hangs around with students of knowledge, even if he's not a student of knowledge yet, or even if he hasn't reached their level, he should aspire to be them, to be like them, to hang around them. And the opposite goes, to stay away from those people that will disencourage you from seeking knowledge, or that will turn you away from seeking knowledge and say, why are you always going to the class? Let's go enjoy ourselves, let's go over here, let's go there, and so on. And they want to do tawaf around the whole of London. Nah. So avoid friends that are like that. Then he says, a narration by, or a statement by Raqib al-Asfahani rahimahullah, he says, ليس إعداء الجليس للجليس بمقاله وفعاله فقط. The person isn't just affected by his friend in terms of what he says and what he does. لكن بل النظر بل بالنظر فيه يعني أو إليه, just by looking at him, that student or that person that you're friends with, just by you looking at them, that will affect your character. So imagine constantly being around the people of knowledge, constantly being around students of knowledge. You're going to do as they do, no matter what. You're going to end up speaking like your shaykh. You're going to speak like your shaykh. That's why the shaykh that you're taking knowledge from has to be a person who has these adab himself. Otherwise, you're not really benefiting. And when you're learning from a person, or when you're studying under a person, you're not just learning his knowledge, like you're learning his methodology, his aqidah. You're learning his etiquettes from him and the manners that they have. So if a person is humble, then the student will be humble. Lakin if the teacher is haughty and has kibr, then the student will have kibr. And we see that all the time. مثلا الآن, let's be honest, amongst some of our Salafi brothers, there are those who have kibr. And it's like they're the only Salafis in the world. They're the only Salafis in the UK. Those people that are like that, what are they going to produce? Students who think they're the only Salafis and no one else is a Salafi. So a student is a product of the teacher. Whatever the teacher is, that's what the student will become. And if you want to get more of an example, look into Ibn Baz rahimahullah and his students. Look into Imam Al-Bani and his students. Look into Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah and his students. The teachers will often, or the students will often be like the teacher, even in the field that he specializes in. Shaykh Mohammed Saleh Al Usaymi rahimahullah, he's known for what science? Although he was a alim in the whole of the Sharia, he's known specifically for what? Fiqh. That's why they say faqih. If faqih al-zaman is mentioned, or faqih al-asr, it automatically goes to, or people automatically think of Shaykh Mohammed Saleh Al Usaymi rahimahullah ta'ala. If you look at the students of Shaykh ibn Uthaymin, they are a carbon cut of him. Exactly like him. How they answer questions, how they explain books, how they teach the books of Ahlul Ilm. Exactly like Ibn Uthaymin rahimahullah ta'ala rahmatan wasi'a. طيب. Then the Shaykh says rahimahullah wa hafidha, that you become friends with a person due to one of three things. Either for a manfa'a, al-fadila, or al-ladha. If we start with fadila, a virtue that they have. مثلا, a person is a student of knowledge. A person is a person of salah. A person is a righteous person. You're with them for this virtue. So you're going to adopt, you're going to learn this from him. And you're friends upon that virtue. So for example, if this person is a student of knowledge and you end up being friends with him because of this, and you meet him in the classes every time, whenever you meet, it's going to be in the places of knowledge. Whenever you talk, you're going to be talking about knowledge. Then there's liladha, or there's manfa'a. You're only with this person for a certain benefit, or two people that are friends for a certain benefit. Mathalan, friends that you play football with, mathalan. You're only going to see them when you're playing football. Or people that you go to certain places with. You're only going to see them when you go to these certain places. Lakin, if it does happen that you don't go to these places, you're not going to have any connection with them. So you're with them for a certain benefit, a manfa'a. Mathalan, if it's wealth, then you're only going to be with them for as long as they have wealth, or for as long as you have wealth. Other than that, they're not going to call you. Then liladha, for a certain pleasure. And this goes for the same goes for this as the last one. You're only going to be with that person for as long as you can enjoy this certain pleasure. Like in the person that you're with due to the virtue that they possess, then it will be different. Because you're getting closer to Allah Jalla wa Ala just by being with them. طيب. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, he mentions in the end, Shaykh Muhammad ibn Mani' rahimahullah, he mentions in his book إرشاد الطلاب, ويحذر كل الحذر من مخالطة السفهاء وأهل المجون والوقاحة وسيء السمع والأغبياء والبلداء. طيب. The Shaykh says, a student or a person should avoid, the student of knowledge should totally avoid being surrounded with those foolish people, hanging around with foolish people, hanging around with people that are known for being vile, hanging around with people that are known for backbiting, hanging around with people that are known for abusing people and insulting people, and those people that have a bad reputation. So a person should avoid hanging around with these people, because you are going to end up being like them. It is enough that if you hang around with a person that possesses these characteristics that we've just mentioned, from being foolish and so on, you're going to end up being like them. And even if you don't, mathalan, if they're a person who backbites, the very least that you'll get, which is the worst, is that you'll be sinning. because you're in the gathering of a person that is backbiting. And backbiting has become you find people that say there's halal backbiting. And they talk about their brothers and their sisters and they lie about them and so on. And they say it's halal for us to do. That is extremely dangerous because you're saying something which is haram is halal. And that is not jarh wa ta'dil. That is not what is known as jarh wa ta'dil in the books of hadith. It's just plain ghiba. Because in it there's lying and there's backbiting. Naam, al-fadila, for a virtue, a certain virtue that they have or that you have. طيب.
قال المصنف حفظه الله: المعقد الثالث عشر بذل الجهد في تحفظ العلم والمذاكرة به والسؤال عنه، إذ تلقيه عن الشيوخ لا ينفع بلا حفظ له ومذاكرة به وسؤال عنه، فهؤلاء تحقق في قلب طالب العلم تعظيمه بكمال الالتفات إليه والاشتغال به، فالحفظ خلوة بالنفس، والمذاكرة جلوس إلى القرين، والسؤال إقبال على العالم. ولم يزل العلماء الأعلام يحضون على الحفظ ويأمرون به. سمعت شيخنا ابن عثيمين رحمه الله يقول: حفظنا قليلا وقرأنا كثيرا، فانتفعنا بما حفظنا أكثر من انتفاعنا بما قرأنا. وبالمذاكرة تدوم حياة العلم في النفس ويقوى تعلقه بها، والمراد بالمذاكرة مدارسة الأقران. وقد أمرنا بتعاهد القرآن الذي هو أيسر العلوم. روى البخاري ومسلم عن ابن عمر رضي الله عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: إنما مثل صاحب القرآن كمثل صاحب الإبل معقلة إن عاهد عليها أمسكها وإن أطلقها ذهبت. قال ابن عبد البر في كتابه التمهيد عند هذا الحديث: وإذا كان القرآن الميسر للذكر كالإبل المعقلة من تعاهدها أمسكها، فكيف بسائر العلوم؟ وبالسؤال عن العلم تفتتح خزائنه، فحسن المسألة نصف العلم. والسؤالات المصنفة كمسائل أحمد المروية عنه برهان جلي على عظيم منفعة السؤال. وهذه المعاني الثلاثة للعلم بمنزلة الغرس للشجر وسقيه وتنميته بما يحفظ قوته ويدفع آفته. فالحفظ غرس العلم، والمذاكرة سقيه، والسؤال عنه تنميته.
طيب. So the 13th point, the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, وحفظه, striving in memorizing knowledge and reviewing knowledge and asking. Striving in memorizing knowledge, reviewing knowledge, revising and asking. So the Shaykh says, rahimahullah ta'ala, إِذْ تَلَقِيهِ عَنِ الشُّيُوخِ لَا يَنْفَعُ بِلَا حِفْظٍ. Just by listening and taking from mashayikh and your teachers without memorizing it, then it won't benefit. وَمُذَاكَرَةٍ بِهِ, and without reviewing it and revising it, it won't benefit you. وَالسُّؤَالٍ عَنْهُ, and also asking about it. If you don't ask and you don't constantly question yourself and you don't put the lesson into a question of a Q&A format, then a lot of times it won't benefit you. Lakin, how do you benefit from what you learn? Firstly, by memorizing it. And if you can't memorize it, by at the very least knowing exactly what it is that is being taught and reviewing it. And reviewing goes with reviewing it with your peers, reviewing it with your friends, those brothers that attend the class or those sisters that attend the class with you. So whatever class you study, make sure. So مثلا, if there's a 1 hour class and you've studied مثلا Usul al-Thalatha or the first 10 pages of Usul al-Thalatha, make sure you have a gathering for reviewing knowledge. Review it on your own and review it with your friends. And ideally, it's better to first go home and review it on your own. And write whatever you benefited, whatever you understood, what you didn't understand, and so on. Write it down. and then reviewing it with your friends. Because there's no point, مثلا, after today's class, in about an hour, going with a few friends and then reviewing it again. Although there is benefit, like you benefit more if you go home and you review it on your own first. You revise on your own. And then you revise with your peers. Then you revise with your with those people that you're gonna revise the class with. طيب. نعم. So the Shaykh says فالحفظ خلوة بالنفس. So memorizing, once you're memorizing something, you're having seclusion with your soul. You're going to be with yourself. There's khalwa there. ومذاكرة جلوس إلى القرين. And mudhakara, what he means by mudhakara is julusun إلى القرين, sitting with your peers and reviewing knowledge and say, what have you understood? Did you understand this point? Is this as I understood it? And so on. طيب. والسؤال إقبال على العلم على العالم. And by asking questions, then you're drawing near and to the alim and to the scholar or to the sheikh, and you're understanding more. طيب. Then he mentions Shaykh 𝐁-𝐤𝐝 rahimahullah ta'ala. He said, حفظنا قليلا, we memorized a little. وقرأنا كثيرا, but we read a lot. يعني the Shaykh says, Ibn Uthaymin, I read a lot and I memorized a little. فانتفعنا بما حفظنا أكثر من انتفاعنا بما قرأنا. And I benefited more from what I memorized than what I read. So they go hand in hand. Memorizing, reading, and understanding. So if a person reads and they understand and they memorize, then they can say they've perfected that class or that knowledge that they've memorized and understood. Like if a person understands, like they haven't memorized it, somewhere along the line they may forget, or when they're out on their own, they're not going to remember that. They will only remember it when they've got the book in front of them. So مثلا أصول الثلاثة مثلا, and I only mention أصول الثلاثة because that's the next book that we're going to study inshallah. When you study the beginning, the مقدمة مثلا اعلم رحمك الله أنه يجب علينا تعلم أربع مسائل. طيب. And then the teacher explains that. When you go home, you review and you memorize that. Then later on, when you review it with your friends, try to explain it to one another without looking at the book. Or look at the book the first time round. Like in your other gatherings, a week, two, a month later, try reading that by heart. And the more you do it, the closer you get to, or the more you do it, the more you perfect it. مثلا Shaykh Saleh Al Fawzan حفظه, every book that you see him explaining, he never has the book in front of him. He just sits down, walks into the masjid, and he sits down. And he doesn't have a book with him. Allahu A'lam, maybe 30, 40 years ago he used to have the book with him. Like now, he doesn't have the book with him. To the extent that even when he was explaining Fath al-Majid مثلا, Fath al-Majid is the explanation of Kitab al-Tawheed. And it's not an explanation which is easy to understand. It's quite in depth. When the Shaykh, when the person that's reading the book, when he's reading the explanation of Fath al-Majid, if he makes a mistake, the Shaykh corrects him. The Shaykh corrects him. And you will find that also in the kulliyah, in the uni and so on, in the faculty of Sharia مثلا, some of the scholars, they don't have books. They don't have the book in front of them. Because they've read it so many times, they know what the Imam said and what he didn't say, and what his wording is and what his methodology is in terms of authoring and so on. So مثلا, there's a book by Ibn Qudama rahimahullah. It's called Rawdat al-Nadhir. It's a book in Usul al-Fiqh. It's about 3 volumes with the commentary and so on, the tahliqat. There was a Shaykh called Abdurrahman Sadhan, hafidhahullah. Very, very old Shaykh. He used to take ages walking to the class. So he's literally shaking and he's walking towards the class. Ajib, like, and he was always there before everyone, and he was always in the university, in his office before 7:30. Like, when he would walk to class, he would only have the class register with him. Then in one of the lessons, I remember one of the students was reading from the book, Rawdat al-Nadhir, and he made a mistake. And the student said, "La, repeat it, that's not what he said." And then the student, he repeated the mistake and he said, "La, repeat it, that's not what the Shaykh said." And then when he concentrated and he looked at the book properly, he realized that it is as the Shaykh is saying. And it was the fact that he actually made a mistake. The Shaykh doesn't have the book on him. Because he's read it so many times. And he was a Shaykh of Shaykh 𝐁𝐸-𝐸𝐿. Shaykh 𝐁𝐸-𝐸𝐿 is one of the Imams of this. A very knowledgeable alim. He was one of his teachers, before 40 years. Around 40 years ago. That's when he was teaching this book. So the more you review the book, the better. طيب. Then the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, he mentions the example of the Quran. So the Prophet ﷺ mentioned and encouraged the person that's memorizing the Quran to constantly review and memorize the Quran. For if you memorize a surah and you don't read it for a long period of time, you will totally forget it. You will forget it, no matter what surah it is. Apart from the Fatiha, only because we read it every single day. Like in every other surah, you may end up forgetting. Like in the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam encouraged us to ta'ahad al-Quran, to constantly read it. If that is the case, the Shaykh says, if that is the case with the Kitab of Allah, which Allah Jalla wa Ala said, وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الذِّكْرِ وَلَقَدْ يَسَّرْنَا الْقُرْآنَ لِلذِّكْرِ فَهَلْ مِن مُدَّكِرٍ. صح? Allah Jalla wa Ala made it easy. Memorizing the Quran and understanding Allah Jalla wa Ala made it easy. If that's the situation of the hal of the Quran, then how about other forms of knowledge? It is more befitting that we review constantly, revise other types of knowledge as well. Fine. So then the Shaykh mentions an example right at the end. He compared these three to بمنزلة الغرس. يعني العلم, we're talking about ilm. Seeking knowledge is like planting a tree. And وَسَقْيُهُ, and watering the tree is tending to the watering it and tending to it is the tanmiyah of it. It's how you make it stronger. So obviously memorizing is how you make your knowledge stronger, the Shaykh is saying rahimahullah ta'ala. فَالْحِفْظُ غَرْسٌ لِلْعِلْمِ. So knowledge is you putting down the foundations for the tree, for your knowledge. وَالْمُذَاكَرَةُ سَقْيُهُ, and reviewing it and revising it with your friends and within yourself, that is you actually watering your knowledge. It's like you're watering your knowledge. You're constantly reviewing it. وَالسُّؤَالُ عَنْهُ تَنْمِيَةُ, and by asking questions, then that is your way of also increasing your knowledge and increasing your understanding. And after a period of time, if you ask questions, you will learn how to ask a question. You will learn how to ask a question, because even asking questions has etiquettes. From the etiquettes of asking a question is only mentioning the things that have a direct connection to the ruling that the Shaykh will give you, or have a direct connection to the fatwa that you want. مثلا, if a person has an argument with his wife and he says to her, "I divorce you," and he wants a fatwa. If he says, "After I woke up, I went to work and I had a bad day at work, or I had a good day at work, I met fulan and fulan and fulan, and then took me ages to get home, took me about 2 hours to get home, and I was stuck in traffic. And then when I got home, the wife said to me, 'Why didn't you bring milk on your way here?' And we had an argument for about 2 hours, and I eventually said to her, 'I divorce you.'" Right. Everything before I said to her, "I divorce you," has nothing to do with the question itself. The fact that he went work, the fact that it took him 6 hours getting back, the fact that she told him to bring something and he didn't bring that item, that has nothing to do with the question. So when you're asking a question, only ask that thing which is directly connected to the question that you need answering. So if you send an email, you can send 50 lines. Like in reality, the hukum that the Shaykh needs to hear is just 2 lines. Now you may not notice him straight away, lakin the more you ask and the more you listen to the way the Shaykh is replying, then you will know, you will learn how to ask a question and what matters and what doesn't matter. I said to my wife, I divorce you. The brother said that with the example that I mentioned, what would be the part that relates to the question and the answer? That's a good question. Jazakallah khair. The part that relates to the question is, Shaykh, I had an argument with my wife. It was a heated argument. And I said to her, I divorce you. What is the hal? What is the solution? And what happens now? That's all. The Shaykh doesn't care what you did before that, what kind of day you had, and so on. Nothing to do with them. طيب.
قال المصنف حفظه الله: المعقد الرابع عشر: إكرام أهل العلم وتوقيرهم. إن فضل العلماء عظيم ومنصبهم منصب جليل لأنهم آباء الروح، فالشيخ أب للروح كما أن الوالد أب للجسد، فالاعتراف بفضل المعلمين حق واجب. قال شعبة بن الحجاج رحمه الله: كل من سمعت منه حديثا فأنا له عبد. واستنبط هذا المعنى من القرآن محمد بن علي الأضفوي فقال: إذا تعلم الإنسان من العالم واستفاد منه الفوائد فهو له عبد. قال له تعالى: وإذ قال موسى لفتاه وهو يوشع بن نون ولم يكن مملوكا له وإنما كان متلمذا له متبعا له فجعله الله فتاه لذلك. وقد أمر الشرع برعاية حق العلماء إكراما لهم وتوقيرا وإعزازا. فروى أحمد رحمه الله في المسند عن عبادة بن الصامت رضي الله عنه أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: ليس من أمتي من لم يجل كبيرنا ويرحم صغيرنا ويعرف لعالمنا حقه.
طيب. The Shaykh says, rahimahullah, the 14th point, إكرام أهل العلم وتوقيرهم, honoring the people of knowledge, respecting them, and preserving their status amongst the ummah. The scholars, they are the inheritors of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, Al-ulama warathatul anbiya. The scholars are the inheritors of the anbiya. Why did the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam say they are the inheritors of the anbiya? Inheritance is what? Is that which a person leaves behind when they pass away. Sah? When it comes to worldly things, when a person passes away, who takes his inheritance? Inshallah, when you're studying fiqh, Bab al-Mirath or Kitab al-Mirath, you'll learn in Fara'id, inheritance, that there are people that inherit the deceased. When a person passes away, there are people that inherit. The closer that person is to them, the more they inherit. So, mathalan, if a person passes away and he's got a son, he leaves behind the son gets all of the wealth. And nothing goes to his uncle and so on. If his father's there, then his father gets a share, but his son gets the remaining tarika, or whatever he leaves behind. The mahalu shahid is what? The closest people to the disease, the person that's passed away, they're the ones that inherit him, right? The closest people to the anbiya are who? The closest people to the messengers and the prophets are the scholars. So because they are the closest people, they are those that inherit them. And what they inherit is al-ilm. وَإِنَّ الْأَنْبِيَاءَ لَمْ يُوَرِثُوا دِينَارًا وَلَا دِرْهَمًا وَإِنَّمَا وَرَثُوا الْعِلْمَ. The anbiya, they do not leave behind dirahim, money, wealth. They leave behind al-ilm. They leave behind knowledge. So the scholars are the inheritors of the anbiya. That's why, just like we respect and we honor the anbiya of Allah Jalla wa Ala, likewise, obviously on a lower scale, likewise the scholars of the Sharia, we love them, we honor them, and we preserve them. And we preserve their status and their reputation and so on. The Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in authentic hadith, يَحْمِلُ هَذَا الْعِلْمَ مِنْ كُلِّ خَلَفٍ عُدُولُهُ. the knowledge will be carried by every generation by its just ones, its udul. And what are they doing? ينفون عنه تحريف الغالين وانتحال المبطلين وتأويل الجاهلين. And what are these ulama doing? They're refuting the distortion of those who distort the Sharia. They're refuting the lies of those who lie against the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And they refute the false interpretation of those who falsely interpret the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the scholars are the inheritors of the Anbiya. They're the ones that preserve the Sharia of Islam. The more scholars there are, the better this ummah is. And likewise, the students of knowledge. Students of knowledge also come under this. People respecting their asatida and students of knowledge, and even their peers when they're studying and they're learning with them. Na'am. So the Shaykh says, rahimahullah, wa hafidha, inna fadl al-ulama azim. Verily the fadl, the virtue of the ulama is azim. And their position is an honorable position. Why is that? لأنهم آباء الروح. They are fathers of the soul. فالشيخ, the Shaykh, أب للروح. And for this one, we're going to read it line for line, inshallah, because of its importance. فالشيخ, the Shaykh is the Ab, he is the father of the Ruh. كما أن الوالد أب للجسد. Just like the father, your biological father is the father of your body. He's given birth to you and you take his lineage. فالاعتراف بفضل المعلمين حق واجب. So acknowledging the virtue of your teachers and your mashayikh, it is a haqq that is wajib upon you. It's something which is wajib upon you. And then he says, قال الشعبة ibn Hajjaj rahimahullah, from one of the Salaf, one of the scholars of Hadith, كل من سمعت منه حديثا. Everyone that I have heard the hadith from, فأنا له عبد. Verily I am a abd for him. I am a servant for him. Why? Because he has benefited me. He has taught me. And because of that, I will forever be in debt to him. That's what this Imam is saying, rahimahullah ta'ala, rahmatan wasi'ah. طيب. So Ibn Taymiyyah said, rahimahullah ta'ala, in line with this, he says, Al-Muallimu wal-Mu'addibu wal-Shaykhu. The Muallim, the teacher, the Mu'addib, the person that gives tarbiyah, wal-Shaykhu, and the Shaykh, Abun li-Ruhi. They are fathers of the soul. Kama anna al-Walida, just like the father is an Ab, he's a father to al-Jasad, to the body. Which is similar to what the Shaykh said, Hafidhahullah ta'ala. وَاسْتَنْبَطَ هَذَا الْمَعْنَى. And then he gives a similar example of how a person becomes like a servant to that to his Shaykh, or the person that he benefits from. And he says, the hadith, the verse of Allah Jalla wa'ala, وَإِذْ قَالَ مُوسَى لِفَتَاهُ, when Musa alayhi salam was with his the student of his, who he used to ask him to do things for him and command him to do things, and he would do it for him. He wasn't his servant. The Shaykh names him and he says his name was Yusha ibn Nun, lakin he wasn't his servant. Lakin he was someone that used to benefit from him and learn from him. So Allah Jalla wa Ala called him his fata, his young person, his young student, the person that used to benefit from him. And the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or in the Sharia, the Shaykh says, وَقَدْ أَمَرَ الشَّرْعُ بِرِعَايَةِ حَقِّ الْعُلَمَاءِ إِكْرَامًا لَهُمْ وَتَوْقِيرًا وَإِعْزَازًا. So we've been commanded in the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in the Sharia, to admire and to revere and to honor the scholars. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. Why? Because they are the ones that fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the most. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge, the people of remembrance, if you do not know. So Allah referred us back to them for His Sharia. Allah Jalla wa Ala referred us back to them with regards to His Sharia. Anything you do not know of the Sharia of Allah Jalla wa Ala, Allah is telling you to ask the people of knowledge. So the people that are like that, then it is deserving that we respect them and we are humble towards them and we do not defame them and so on. طيب. How can a person distinguish, and when the scholars are saying we honor the scholars of Ahl Ilm, they're talking about all the scholars, they're talking about the scholars of Ahl Sunnah. Those people who preserve the Sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Those people who preserve the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. طيب. Question, and I want you to write this down. How can we differentiate between scholars of Haqq, the scholars that are calling to the Haqq, or the students of knowledge that are calling to the Haqq, and those that are calling to Al-Batil, falsehood? The first is bil ilm, by learning, by seeking knowledge yourself. With knowledge, you will know who's upon the haqq and who isn't upon the haqq. And that's why Ali radiallahu anhu, he used to say, know the truth and you will know the men upon it. You will know those who are upon the truth. But you won't know the truth by the men. Mathalan, you won't know the men by the truth. So you can't say, this is Albani, he's definitely, and his opinion is definitely the stronger opinion. Or that's Ibn Baz rahimahullah, he's definitely on the stronger opinion. La. Know the truth, know the haqq, learn, and then you will know who the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah are and who those who oppose them are. So a lot of people nowadays, when they hear a person memorize al-Hadeeth and saying the sanad fulan an fulan, haddathana fulan wa fulan fulan qala rasul, they're amazed. Wallah, he's memorized so much, mashallah. When in reality, he's calling to falsehood. He's a person from the people of Ahlul Bid'ah. He's from a person from the people of Ahlul Bid'ah. So the only way you can differentiate, or one of the ways that you can, the most important way you can differentiate is by learning yourself. Also, inayatuhum bit-tawheed. The second way to tell if a person is upon the haqq or batil, a alim of the haqq or alim of batil, or student of knowledge of haqq, is that they give importance to tawheed. The importance that they give to tawheed. So if you see a person calling to tawheed, then more often than not that person is upon a khayr, inshaAllah. The alim or that student of knowledge is a person upon khayr. Like if you see them drifting the people away from tawheed and saying tawheed is, we're all Muslims, let's look at other things. Let's talk about politics, let's talk about hakimiyya, let's talk about this, and let's talk about jihad and so on. Then you need to know that that person is not upon the methodology of Ahlul Ilm, not upon the methodology of the Sunnah. Because if this person doesn't give Tawheed its importance, they are not following the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَلَقَدْ بَعَثْنَا فِي كُلِّ أُمَّةٍ رَسُولًا أَنْ اعْبُدُوا اللَّهَ وَاجْتَنِبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ. Allah Jalla wa Ala mentions in this surah, in this verse, that every messenger came with the call of Tawheed. Now if this person opposes this, then he is not upon the methodology of the Anbiya. Number 3, دعوتهم إلى الكتاب والسنة. They're calling to, or the third point that you can tell if they're calling up to the haqq, is that they call to the kitab of Allah and the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They call to the kitab of Allah and the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. How? Mathalan, alan, recently, what did we have? What do many of the Muslims celebrate today? The Mawlid of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The celebration of the birthday of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is a bid'ah, which is an innovation that was introduced into this ummah in the 4th century. So the Salaf Saleh did not have or did not practice this bid'ah. طيب. When a person is given a khutbah or when they're given a lecture in this sort of period, in this sort of time, month, they should be talking about what? The innovation of bid'atul mawlid. They should be refuting it. They should be calling to the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They should be warning against opposing the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They should be warning against this innovated act into the Sharia of Islam, being celebrating the birthday of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And alhamdulillah, you will find, if you look into the accounts and the channels of Ahlul Sunnah in the last week and a half, every single one of them, bi'idhnillah, is refuting this bid'ah of the Mawlid. Lakin, if you look at the people of deviance, you see them doing the opposite. They won't warn against this bid'ah. Rather, they won't call it a bid'ah. They won't call it a bid'ah. They will say it's a way of celebrating the history, the biography of the Messenger. We're reviving his biography, we're reviving his sunnah and so on. So automatically know that if that is what the person is upon, then they're a person of bid'ah and innovation. If they're calling to other than the sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam in a time that they're meant to be calling to the sunnah, then know that that person is a person of misguidance. Especially nowadays, when it comes to mathal, in the days that we're living in now, the mawlid of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What's stopping the person from refuting it? So that is something that you can easily distinguish between them. طيب. Also, their thabat in times of fitan. Their thabat, please write the questions down because I want to get through quite a bit until Isha, inshallah. Naam. How they're firm in times of fitan. Mathalan, when trials and tribulations before this ummah, you will find the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah, they're firm. And they don't change, they don't waver, they don't go around like the windmill, they don't change around. What they said 20 years ago is the same as they say now. Because it's based on the Quran and the Sunnah. Whereas you find the people of bid'ah, Naam. You disturbed me, Shaykh. I was somewhere. In terms of fitan, مثلا the Rabi' al-Arabi, the Arab Spring. When the Arab Spring started, when the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah were asked, they refuted it. 10 years later, 11 years later, they're still refuting it. During the fitan, they were refuting it. Like in those people from the scholar, the mashayikh of al-bid'ah and the innovations and partisanship and so on, the Ikhwan Muslim and so on, they were encouraging it from the beginning to the end. And they're saying, no, we need sacrifice. Although it's not them that's actually sacrificing their lives. Like in they say, no, there needs to be sacrifice in this ummah. طيب. Now, having said that, also from them is that from the signs that they love for their brothers what they love for themselves. They love for their brothers and the ummah of Muhammad of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they love for them what they love for themselves. طيب. Lakin, we have to understand, when we're talking about the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah, we're saying we respect them and we love them, we talk about all of the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah. Lakin, sadly, what has happened amongst the Ahlul Sunnah, amongst Salafiyun nowadays, and it has been going on for about 20 years now, is that there has been Hizbiyya coming into the ranks of the Salafis. And this is a reality. So the Hizbiyya that we refute Ikhwan Muslimin for, you find it coming into the ranks of the Salafis. And then you find that every person has ta'assub to his shaykh. And this is a reality. I'm being straightforward with you. Hizbiyya partisanship. Yani you're with me or against me. Having a cult mentality. And ta'assub, blind following. So mathalan, you will find that for them it's okay to say, for these people it's okay to say, Imam Ahmed made a mistake in this mas'ala. أخطأ إمام الشافعي في هذه المسألة. Imam al-Shafi'i made a mistake in this mas'ala, and the stronger opinion is the opinion of the Hanabila or the opinion of the Malikiyya and not the opinion of the Shafi'iyya. So it's easy for them to say that Imam Shafi'i made a mistake or this is a weak opinion and so on. Like if you say that their Shaykh made a mistake or a Shaykh from the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah made a mistake, إياك ثم إياك, you'll get taken off the so-called manhaj. So this partisanship has come into the ranks of the Salafis, and it's something that needs to be cleansed and cleaned out of the ranks of the Salafis, because it defeats the purpose of Salafi. Salafi is connecting yourself to قال الله وقال رسول وقال السلف. قال الله وقال رسول وقال الصحابة. Connecting the people to Allah Jalla wa Ala, to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam upon the understanding of the Salaf. Lakin to say that my Shaykh, whatever he's upon is the haqq, and whatever contradicts what he's upon is batin, then that is Hizbiyya in of itself. So you will find that maybe 20 years ago, many scholars were known. Many scholars used to visit all parts of the world, and they were called Al-Allama and Fulan and so on. And then every single year, 3 are dropped, 4 are dropped, or 5 are taken off the manhaj. He's fallen into this, and he defends this, and he defends that, and so on. To the extent that people are only left with a handful of scholars. And in reality, many of our brothers from Ahlul Sunnah, they don't refer back to the methodology of Ibn Baz and Ibn Usaymin and Al-Albani rahimahullah and Shaykh Al-Fawzan hafidhahullah and other than them. Because if we look back 20 years ago, 21 years ago, when these great Imams were alive, none of these fitan were there. What's changed? Ibn Baz and Ibn Usaymin will differ over an issue. Ibn Baz and Al-Albani will differ over a thing. Mas'ala. Lakin they wouldn't call each other's students to refute one another. Take him off the manhaj. Albani made a mistake, take him off the manhaj. Or Albani or Ibn Baz made a mistake, take him off the manhaj. La, that's not from the methodology of Ahlul Sunnah. And it's important that you know and that you seek knowledge so that you can differentiate between the haqq and the batil. I remember a story that Shaykh Abu Suhaib hafidhahullah, he mentioned years back. he mentioned he's starting Kitab al-Tawheed. So he was showing the importance of Tawheed, or someone that can deny what he previously knew of. So he said there were two men, and they noticed that people were doing tawaf around the graves. And then when they were doing tawaf, people doing tawaf from graves, they used to leave a lot of money there, animals and money and so on. And then people, the ones that were monitoring or guarding the graves, they used to make a lot of money out of it. So they said to one another, listen, let's bury something here, and then we'll tell people that awliya have been buried here. Righteous people have been buried here, and then they will do tawaf, and we can make money out of it. We can make money out of it. We can make a fortune out of it. So it was like a money-making scheme for them. So they got a dog, they buried the dog. Then they said, Fulan, Abdul Qadir, Fulan, mashallah, he's buried here, may Allah have mercy upon him. Ask Allah near his grave and so on. People are ignorant. So after a period of time, after years and so on, people started doing tawaf and asking Allah Jalla wa Ala to grant them children or whatever with regards to next to this grave. Then after a period of time, there were two of them that buried the dog, right? One of them started doing tawaf around the grave. The other one pulled him to our side. He says, Ta'al. What are you doing? We buried the dog there. And he said, yeah, there must be something buried there because people are coming in their numbers. There are so many people, so there must be some sort of truth to it. Yeah, Ghabi, yesterday we buried the dog there. So after a period of time, the mahal shahid I'm getting at is, after a period of time, if falsehood continues, then people will normalize it. So the reason why I'm saying this is what is implemented amongst the Salafis is not what the scholars were upon or on this chapter, on this issue of boycotting and so on, is not what was known during the time of Imam Muqbil, Imam Albani, Ibn Uthaymeen, Ibn Baz and Albani and so on. It wasn't. It's something that is new, and it's something that we have to get rid of and we have to be aware of. And it's something that is torturing the youth. Sometimes you see them, they attend classes like they're scared to say they attend these classes because they'll be refuted. It happens. I'm not talking of a way off universe. I'm talking about things that occur in our communities. Brothers are scared to attend the lessons of Ahlul Sunnah. Brothers are scared to attend the lessons of those that are known upon the Sunnah because they will get refuted. Brothers are scared to say, I study under Fulan or I study because they're scared that they'll be refuted. And I genuinely feel sorry for them because they're youngsters and they can fall down to peer pressure. So it's wajib upon these brothers that are doing these things to know that this is batil. To know that this is not what Salafiyya is. This is not what is known amongst the scholars of Ahlul Sunnah. I know it was mentioned to the youth and so on, we're connecting you to the scholars. In reality, these people are connecting you to themselves. And the only way you can defeat this is if you learn. Trust me. The only way that you can defeat this and that you can prevent yourself from falling into fitan is that you stay away from fitan and that you learn. Why should the da'wah of a certain place be destructed because two scholars of Ahlul Sunnah have a debate or two scholars have differed over a certain issue? If two scholars of Ahlul Sunnah differ over something in one part of the world, why should it split us? Also, common sense, for how long are we going to start splitting? Every time that two scholars have an issue between themselves or they refute one another, are we going to also refute one another? Are we also going to boycott one another? There were gatherings. Now, there's quite a lot of you here. It may be that in a few months' time, there's only half of you. Why? Because there are people that are always prone to falling into fitan. And I'm sure many of you, there are people that tell you don't go to this masjid, don't go to that masjid, and don't study under this and don't study under that. Imam Malik said, rahimahullah, a man said to him, yeah, Imam, come and debate with me. He goes, okay, I'll come and debate with you. What if I beat you? What if I defeat you in the debate? He goes, then I follow you. He goes, Taib. What if you defeat me? He goes, then you follow me. He goes, Taib. What if a third person comes and he defeats me and you? Because then we follow him. And he said words that you should all write and memorize and understand. أو كلما جاءنا رجل أجدل من رجل. Is it the case that every time a man comes to us who is more argumentative and stronger in his case, improving his case than the other one, تركنا ما جاء به جبريل على رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Are we going to leave what the Prophet what Jibreel came to the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam with, meaning the revelation of Allah? Are we going to leave the Quran and the Sunnah and the understanding of the Salaf every single time because of two scholars having a debate or having an issue or differing or even refuting one another? La, this shouldn't be the case. And unfortunately, this happens all the time. Where every time something happens in one part of the world, the ignorant people who have no knowledge, who haven't implemented the methodology of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, the methodology of the scholars, they start writing out bayanat. My mawqif, what is your mawqif? My mawqif is this. What is your mawqif? And then forcing different institutes to have one mawqif. That's not something that was known in the Sharia of Allah. Forget about the times of the Salaf. It wasn't even known during the time of Imam Ibn Baz, Ibn Uthaymin and so on. Find me a single fatwa that Albani rahimahullah or Ibn Baz or Ibn Uthaymin or a Shaykh Muqbil rahimahullah made an opinion, had an opinion, and he forced all of his students to have the same opinion. And he said, if you don't have this opinion, then you are to be boycotted. You won't find a single one. You won't find a single fatwa. We'll stop there inshallah for now, and then we'll continue on this same point due to its importance next week. Wallahu ta'ala a'lam wa ahkamu billahi tawfiq.